Hey guys, this is Will.
And this is Riley.
And we're going to be talking about Buss and Spencer's 2012 article entitled When Seeing is Knowing, the Role of Visual Cues in the Dissociation Between Children's Rule Knowledge and Rule Use.
So the big question here is there a dissociation between children's rule knowledge and rule use in the DCCS? In other words, is it possible for children to perform a certain task without understanding it? Or vice versa? Is it possible for children to understand a task but not be able to perform it? So here's some background information. It mostly refers to two articles. In the first article from Zelazo, Fry, and Rappus in 1996, it reports that knowledge is intact, but children lack the control to inhibit role representations that were active during the pre-switch phase and engage a new role representation when asked to switch roles. So children correctly reported post-switch rules, but failed the post-switch sorting task. So they concluded that there is a dissociation between rule use and rule knowledge. In the second article, in Munkata and Yeris in 2001, perseverators have weak representation of the rules, but they can use them when placed in context with easy post-task questions. And these easy post-task questions can be referred to as unit-dimensional questions, which Zelazo, Fry, and Rappus use. For example, a unidimensional question is, where do stars go in the shape game? It's just knowledge of shape. And I will contrast that with conflict questions later. So Munkata and Yeris both concluded that verbal stimuli is important. Both show a reliance on referring back to latent information, hypothesizing that children go back to A, not B. So here's the graph from Munkata and Yeris. So a conflict question, as opposed to a unidimensional standard question, is, for example, where do blue stars go in the shape game? So blue stars and shape game, that has two dimensions, color and shape. But a unidimensional standard question, like where do stars go in the shape game? Star is a shape, so only has one dimension. So as you can see, weak representation of this post-switch rule are overcome by strong latent traces of the pre-switch dimension. In the first cell, you can see with standard, assumingly easy unidimensional questions, there's almost the same number of children who pass questioning, but of the total, half of them passed the post-switch sorting, while the other half failed. This assumes that children do have the knowledge. Also, there are also less children who pass conflict questions, but pass post-switch sorting, which assumes that children rely on latent verbal cues. So, more specifically, the question here is, how are 3-year-old perseverators able to correctly answer the unidimensional post-task question despite failing to switch rules? And in this article by Buss and Spencer, they came up with different hypotheses. Is there a reliance on latent information? Or are perseverators succeed when answering easy post-test questions because the content of the question uniquely overlaps with a visible target feature in the task space? This means that the target card is in front of the children, and they can easily point to it when they're asked about the task. And this is known as the visual cue hypothesis. And success rate should be lower when visual cues are removed.
So for the method, 74 children ages 37 to 45 months were randomly assigned to either the standard condition, the cues absent condition, or the control group. Materials are shown in Image A, and they include trays, target cards with either a red star or blue circle, and test cards with either a red circle or blue star. In the procedure, children completed the DCCS, and the control group only completed the pre-switch phase and were asked questions about only that portion of the task. Then children were asked unidimensional questions about the DCCS task, such as where do the red ones go in the color game? And in the standard condition, children saw the target cards as visual cues, which is shown in image B. And in the cues absent condition, children did not have any visual cues, which is shown in image C. So the results were that the majority of children in the control group correctly sorted the cards in the post-switch task and correctly answered the unidimensional questions. These results confirm that the absence of visual cues requires children to understand the rules required for the DCCS. And then in both experimental conditions, most children perseverated, which is consistent with findings of previous studies. And most children correctly answered the post-task questions. In the standard condition, 96% of children correctly answered the post-task questions, regardless of whether they had perseverated or not. And most children in the cues absent condition who successfully switched rules during the DCCS correctly answered the post-task questions. There was also a significant interaction between condition and question performance, which means that children who did not have visual cues were overall significantly less successful at the post-task questions. And then also, question performance was dependent on condition, meaning that children who perseverated and did not have visual cues were far less successful at the post-task questions than children who did not perseverate, whether or not they had visual cues.
So how do we interpret this? The results show that visual cues do have an effect, and that going back to our main general question, knowledge and action, there is no dissociation between either of them, like proven by both cues absent groups. So it's not consistent with what Sollozzo, Fry, and Rappes found, because they assumed that perseverators simply pointed to target cards. The control group who answered the post-test about pre-test questions correctly, they answered it correctly without visual cues. Perseverators who failed sorting also failed post-test questions. Both show that knowledge and action go hand in hand. So in conclusion, behavior in the sorting and question task emerges in the interaction of the child and the environment.